Welcome back, everybody. We're going to continue and do lesson 9.6, factoring trinomials again, but this time we're going to factor trinomials like this, and what's different is there is a number in front of x squared. There is an a value. And the way we get the a value, I want to show you how we get that. What we actually do is we do this number multiplied to this number will give us that. And if we look here, it was 2x multiplied to x gave us 2x squared. Okay, so that was in our parentheses. Now let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we talked about how to get a. Remember, how we get b is like this. We take the first term and we multiply it to the outside term. So we multiply these two and we get something, and we would get our 2x. Okay, if we go like this. If we multiply the 2x to the 1, then that's how we got our 2x. Okay, so it's this multiplied to this. And then we continue that right here, and we take this, the inside terms, and we multiply those. And that is how we get our 3x, 3 times x. Then lastly, what we do to get our last term is we take this factor and multiply it to this factor. So we multiply these two together. So it would be 3 multiplied to 1, and 3 multiplied to 1 is 3. Alright, so the reason we did this is I'm going to be referring to this later on while we're factoring, because we'll need to be able to know how did we get these middle terms and the relationship between these middle terms and the final 5x. And alright, now what we're going to do is use a different example, and we're going to use the method, the FOIL method that we looked at, to try and factor out this trinomial. First thing I want to point out is this is for used when c is positive, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to look at all the factors of a. So what are the factors of 20? 2 times 1 is 20. 10 multiplied to 2 is 20. 5 times 4 is also 20. Then we're going to look at the factors of c. 3 times 1 is 3, and 1 times 3 is 3. That's it. So that's why we have to repeat it each time. The next thing we're going to do, and I started it right here, is, do you remember in the slide before we had the two middle terms, okay, the outer and the inner, those add up to the middle term. So 20, so we take 20 and we multiply it to 3 and we get 60, and then we take the 1 and we multiply it to the 1 and we get 61. Well, did that add up to 17? No. So that we know that doesn't work. The other thing we try is this. Then we go again and we go, well, how about if we do 20 multiplied to 1? So we do 20 multiplied to 1. That's 20. And then we do 3, or 1 multiplied to this 3. That's 23. That did not add up to 17 either. So that's a no. So we're going to continue this guess and check until we find answers that add up to 17. Okay, so I set this one up. Set up in a similar way. I'm doing 10 multiplied to 3 instead of 20 multiplied to 3. And so 10 times 3 is 30, plus 2 times 1 plus 2 is 32, and that would be a no. That does not equal 17. I'm shooting for 17. Now I'm going to do 10 times 1 is 10, plus 6 is 16. Oh, close, but no. All right, let's try this one. I'll set it up. Okay, so we look here, and I end up with 5 times 3 is 15, plus 4. Ooh, shoot, that's 19. So that's a no also. All right. I think this will be it. 5 times 1 is 5, and 4 times 3 is 12, and 5 plus 12 equals my 17, so this was a yes. Now I want to show you how we set up our answer. Okay, here's what I did. So I took my first term here, 5, and I put it here and put an x with it. And then I took my first term here, the 4, and I put an x with that. So watch what happens here. 5x times 4x is 20x squared. So that worked perfect. Let's look at our last term, our c. We need to get 3. So 3 multiplied to 1, 3 multiplied to 1 is 3. So that worked. Now we need to get our middle. Now our middle is going to be 5 plus 12 is 17, and let's see if we have that. So 5x multiplied to 1, 5x multiplied to 1 is 5x. And now I have to do 3 multiplied to 4x, and that equals 12x. So now I have my 12x. Now look at the middle terms here. 5x plus 12x is 17x. So this works. Notice I did have to switch and put the 3 over on this side and the 1 on this side to make sure it worked. So you always need to check. Alright, we're going to try this again with simpler numbers. We need to factor 2x squared plus 5x plus 3. So I'm going to take my coefficient of x squared, a, and I'm going to write the factors of this. The factors of 2 are just 2 and 1. Next, I'm going to write the factors of 3, 3 and 1. So now I'm going to try and find this middle term. I need to add to 5. Here's what I did. I'm going to take 2 and multiply it to this 1. That's right here. Then I'm going to take the 1 and multiply it to the 3. And let's see what I end up with. 2 times 1 is 2. 3 times 1 is 3. So what is 2 plus 3? 5. It worked. So I know that I can use this. So now let's set up our parentheses. So I know that I need a 2 here. And I need a 1 here. And I also need x's. So let's double check. 2x multiplied to 1x gives me 2x squared. And that's my first term. Next, I need to get my last term. And if you remember last time, what I said to you is you need to check. And what happened last time is we actually took this 3 and we're going to place it here. And I'll show you why we do that in a second. And we're going to take this 1 and place it here. Now, let's find our middle term. So 2x times 1 is 2x. 3 times x is 3x. And what does 2x plus 3x add up to? Yes, 5x. So far I'm almost there. And lastly, what is 3 multiplied to 1? That's 3. So this worked. Alright, so I showed you one method. I'm going to show you another method that I think you'll like called tic-tac-toe. Here's what you do. You set up a tic-tac-toe board, and on your tic-tac-toe board you're going to write A6, you're going to write it right there, and you're going to write C, which is 7, you're going to write it right here. Next, you're going to multiply A to C. And when you do that, 6 multiplied to 7 is 42. Okay, now we're going to have to write B on the side. And if we look here, B is negative 23. So what we're going to do is we're going to write negative 23 here. We need to keep that in mind. Alright, here's how you use the tic-tac-toe board. It'll be a lot like what you did before when you factored. You're going to say to yourself, what are the factors of 42 that add to negative 23? Maybe you remember doing this. So what are the factors of 42 that add to negative 23? Negative 21 multiplied to negative 2 will give us positive 42, and if we add them together, we get negative 23. So I'm going to take these two numbers, and I'm going to write them right here. It doesn't matter which one I write where. So I'm going negative 21, negative 2. Okay, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this 6 and this 21 and say what's the greatest common factor between these two. So the greatest common factor is 3. 3 can divide both of them. Now, I'm also going to put an n here and an n here just because this first term does have 2 n's in it. Alright, now what I'm going to do is what's the greatest common factor between 7 and 21? And the greatest common factor there is going to be 7. And that will not have an n because if we look, there is no variable there. Okay, then lastly, I'm going to do what's my greatest common factor between 6 and 2? Well, my greatest common factor is going to be 2. And next, I'm going to do what's the greatest common factor between 7 and negative 2. And the greatest common factor here will be just 1. Alright, the only drawback to this method that I'm going to show you, we're not done yet, is when you have a negative. Because these have to be negative, what I'm going to do is put a negative here and a negative here. Now I'm going to show you how to make my parentheses. So we'll go like this. The two parentheses that I'm going to make will be these two terms right here will make the first parentheses. So I end up with 2n minus 7. Next, I'm going to take these two and I get 3n minus 1. If I do FOIL, I will get here, I'll get 6n squared, which is what I had here. And then if I go like this, I get minus 2n. And if I go like this, I get minus 21n. And if you put those together, you will get negative 23n. And that's what I had originally. And lastly, if I do negative 7 times negative 1, that gives me a positive 7. And there it is, positive 7. On the next page, I'll show this in another way to do this. Okay, let's try another problem. So we have 3x squared minus 7x minus 6. So it's right here. We're going to do tic-tac-toe on this. So what we're going to do is we're going to write the a value, which is 3, and we're going to write that right here. Next, we're going to write the c value, and the c value is negative 6, and I'm going to write that right here, the c value. This tells me to multiply a and c together. So when I do that, I end up with negative 18. Okay, now, right here in my little side box, I need to write my b value. And my b value is right here in the middle, negative 7. So I'm going to write a negative 7. Now, what I need to do is set up my little chart here and put my negative 18 here and my negative 7 here. And remember what we ask ourselves. What multiplies together to make negative 18 but adds to make negative 7? See if you can do it. Let's see what you ended up with. Did you get negative 9 and 2? And that should work. Negative 9 times 2 is negative 18. Negative 9 plus 2 is negative 7. So let's take these and write them right here. What I want you to notice, and I didn't talk about this in the last slide, 2 multiplied to negative 9 is negative 18. These columns should work going up. So now we have to say to ourselves, what is the greatest common factor between 3 and negative 9? And the greatest common factor is 3. Next, we say, what's the greatest common factor between negative 6 and negative 9? Now, because they're both negative, I can pull out a negative number, and that negative number will be negative 3, because negative 3 can go into both of those. Now, I move down. I say, what's the greatest common factor between 3 and 2? And the greatest common factor between 3 and 2 is actually just 1. Next, I'm going to say what's the greatest common factor between negative 6 and 2? And the greatest common factor there is going to be 2. 2 can divide both of those. Now I forgot to write my x in because this first term is really 3x squared, so that means that I need to have an x here and an x here because that would make 3x squared. Whoops, I wrote 3. 3x squared, that's a 2. Okay, so let's check. 1x times 3x is 3x squared. Yep. 2 multiplied to negative 3 is negative 6, and we already checked this. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9, and 2 times 1 is 2. Okay, we are ready to make our parentheses. Here we go. Our first parentheses will be right here. It will be 1x minus 3. 1x minus 3. Our second parentheses will be right here. 3x plus, because it's positive, 2. Now, we need to check this. Okay, very quickly. X times 3x is 3x squared. Now, 1x multiplied to 2 is 2x. Okay, and that's where I got my 2. And negative 3 times 3x is negative 9x, and that's where I have my negative 9. And now, negative 3 multiplied to 2 is negative 6, and that's my last term. Perfect. We have another example. If you want to, feel free to fill in this tic-tac-toe chart, hit pause, and see if you can do it yourself. But all I'm going to do is just what I did on the other page. I'm going to fill in the A, and this time, you know what I'm going to do? Watch what I do this time. I'll actually write the whole thing, the whole first term here, 5c squared. And then now I'm going to write c, and that's negative 7. Okay, so I'm going to write that right here. Now, what happens if I multiply these together? 5c squared multiplied to negative 7. What I end up with is negative 35c squared. Watch what I'll do here. I'll write negative 35c squared. And then next, remember, we have to say to ourselves, what times what equals negative 35c squared, but we'll add to negative 2c. So I'm going to put my middle term, negative 2c, here. So I need to think of my factors of negative 35. Those factors are negative 7 multiplied to 5. Negative 7 multiplied to 5 is negative 35. But I'm missing a letter, so watch. I'll just go like this. C. Now watch what happens. Negative 7c plus 5c is negative 2c. So I'm actually going to write that right here. Negative 7c and positive 5c. It does not matter which one I write first. Now we do greatest common factor. What's the greatest common factor between 5c squared and negative 7c? Well, that greatest common factor is going to be 1c because 5 and 7 have nothing else in common. What's the greatest common factor between negative 7 and negative 7c? Well, negative 7 can divide both of them. What's the greatest common factor between 5c squared and 5c? Well, there's a 5 in each and there's a c in each. So I'm going to write 5c. Lastly, what's the greatest common factor between negative 7 and 5c? And the greatest common factor there is just 1. So remember what we do next. We circle these two, and that will be our first parentheses. I kind of ran out of room here. Sorry. So our first parentheses will be 5c minus 7. Our second parentheses will be this, and that will be c, I meant to do black, sorry, c plus 1. Now let's check it. Okay, a quick check. 5c times c is 5c squared. 5c times 1 is 5c. Negative 7 times c is negative 7c, and if you add those together, you get negative 2c, and negative 7 times 1 is negative 7. It works. Alright, this is our last one, so if you want to hit pause and try it yourself, you can. Here we go. I'm going to take a, and I'm going to write it right here, and instead of just writing the 5, let's do this new technique. I'm going to write 5x squared. Then I'm going to write c, and that's going to go right here. Now I multiply these together, and when I multiply these together, I end up with negative 15x squared. And I'm going to write that right here, negative 15x squared. Now I look at my middle term, which is 2x, and I say to myself, that's going to go right here. I'm going to say to myself, what do I multiply? What multiplies to make negative 15x, but adds to make 2x? Now the answer to that would be 5x multiplied to negative 3x. 5x multiplied to negative 3x is negative 15x squared. I forgot to put my 2 in that last little bit. And let's add these. 5x plus negative 3x is 2x. So I'm going to take these two and put them here. And remember, if you multiply these going up, you should get the top answer. Negative 3x times 5x is negative 15x. Now let's do greatest common factor. The greatest common factor between 5x squared and 5x is going to be 5x, because there's a 5 in each and there's an x in each. Next, what's the greatest common factor between negative 3 and 5x? And the answer there is just 1. That's all they have in common. What's the greatest common factor between 5x squared and negative 3x? Well, I see that they both have an x, but that's about it. Lastly, greatest common factor between negative 3 and negative 3x. Well, they both have a negative 3. I am ready to write my two parentheses. So, this will be 1 parentheses, x plus 1, and this will be my other parentheses, 5x minus 3. And now let's check. Okay, here we go. X times 5x is 5x squared. Yes, it is. X times negative 3 is negative 3x, right there. 1 times 5x is 5x. And if you add those together, you get positive 2x. Check. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. This works. Here are the practice problems. I would recommend doing the tic-tac-toe method on all three. And please double check. Because of negatives, you have to be careful. So double check your answers. I expect to see that in your answers tomorrow. So bring any questions you have to class when we meet, and take care.